Thanksgiving dinner. My son asked if I liked the lake house he'd given me 2 years ago. My blood ran cold because I'd never received a house or the monthly payments he'd supposedly sent. My daughter-in-law, Serena, stood frozen, and in that moment, I knew the woman I trusted had stolen everything meant for me. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. The words hit me like ice water. Did you like the lake house I gave you, Mom? I stared at Jonathan, my son, across the Thanksgiving table. The scent of turkey suddenly replaced by a sharp, metallic tang. Lake house? My mind fumbled. What house, honey? I managed, my voice a thin whisper. I never received anything. Jonathan's millionaire smile flickered. His gaze darted to Serena, his wife, sitting perfectly still beside him. The house on Lake Morrison. I had it transferred to your name for your birthday 2 years ago. Don't you remember? Serena, her cream-colored coat, draped like a second skin, abruptly pushed back from the table. Her napkin fluttered to the floor. A white flag, abandoned. Oh, I just remembered, she said, unnaturally bright, almost frantic. I need to make a phone call about tomorrow's appointment. Excuse me. She moved too quickly toward the kitchen, phone already in hand. My stomach clenched. Something was terribly off. Jonathan frowned, his businessman's mind already dissecting a problem. Mum, that's impossible. I had Ms. Albright, my assistant, handle all the paperwork. The deed should have been mailed to you, and there were supposed to be monthly maintenance payments set up too. Monthly payments. My legs weakened. What payments? I asked, dread creeping in. The $1,500 I've been sending you every month to help with expenses. Ms. Albright assured me you were receiving everything. The room tilted. $1,500 a month for 2 years. $36,000. Enough to buy my blood pressure medication. Enough to fix my car. Enough to eat more than crackers and peanut butter. I gripped the table, knuckles white. Jonathan, I swear, I haven't received any of it. I've been struggling. Last month I chose between groceries and the electric bill. Jonathan's face went white. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping. That's impossible. I have receipts, bank transfers. Everything should be documented. From the kitchen, Serena's voice was a low, urgent murmur. My hands trembled as the full weight of the situation settled. Show me, I whispered. Show me the paperwork. Jonathan pulled out his phone, scrolling with increasing desperation. I have copies at home. The deed transfer, payment confirmations. Mum, if you haven't been getting this money, then where has it been going? We both turned to the kitchen. Serena's voice had stopped. The silence felt heavy. I walked to the doorway. Serena stood with her back to us, phone to ear, but silent. At our footsteps, she spun, face flushed, a strained smile plastered on. Everything okay? Jonathan asked, his voice now the cold tone he used when sniffing out a lie. Serena's smile looked brittle. Of course, just confirming dinner plans. But the guilt was etched across her features. Her eyes darted away, her fingers nervously fumbling her wedding ring. Serena, Jonathan said slowly, voice dangerously quiet. Do you know anything about the lake house paperwork? You helped coordinate with Ms. Albright on several things. The endless silence. Serena's mouth opened, closed. No words. In that moment, looking at her, I knew. She had taken what was meant for me. This Thanksgiving, the one I'd perfected, was about to shatter my family. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Serena stood frozen, hands clasped, knuckles white. Jonathan stared at her, a terrifying mix of confusion and suspicion in his eyes. Serena? I said quietly, voice steadier than I felt. Where is my lake house? She swallowed hard. There must be some misunderstanding. Perhaps paperwork got lost, an error at the bank. But the lie formed clearly in her eyes. 15 years cleaning offices had taught me to read people. When you're invisible, people talk around you. Serena was lying. Badly. "I'm calling Ms. Albright," Jonathan declared. "She handled this personally." "No, wait!" Serena cried, stepping forward. "We should discuss this privately. Mum's been through enough. Don't upset her more if it's a mix-up." Upset me more? I'd lived on crumbs while she vacationed in Europe. Still, my voice remained eerily calm. "Serena, honey, I think we're past worrying about upsetting me. I need to know where my house is." Jonathan dialed. Ms. Albright's professional voice answered. "Ms. Albright, it's Jonathan. Pull up the paperwork for the lake house I bought for my mother 2 years ago." A pause. Then, clear on speaker. "Of course, Mr. Vance. 1247 Lake Morrison Drive. Deed transferred to Eleanor Vance, November 15th, 2 years ago." I have copies. My heart pounded. My name. My address for paperwork. But I'd never signed. "And the monthly payments?" Jonathan pressed. "All processed. $1,500 on the first, to the account you specified. Account holder, Eleanor Vance. Routing number, ending in 4782. The blood drained from my face. "I don't have an account ending in 4782. Mine ends in 91556. Jonathan's eyes snapped to Serena. "Ms. Albright, read the full account number." As the numbers were read, Serena's face crumbled. It wasn't my account. Not even close. "Ms. Albright," Jonathan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Who provided this account information?" "Your wife, sir. Mrs. Vance called in December 2 years ago. Said there was a change in your mother's banking. Provided the new routing and account numbers for all records." The phone slipped in Jonathan's hand. Serena made a desperate sound. "And the deed?" Jonathan continued. "Where mailed? To the address Mrs. Vance provided. 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B. I'd never lived on Maple Street. My small house was my only address for a decade." Jonathan ended the call. The silence was deafening. His face, when he looked at Serena, was blank, more terrifying than anger. "Explain," he demanded. Serena's composure shattered. Tears flowed, but they were panic, not remorse. "Jonathan, you have to understand. My parents were losing their house, elderly, father's medical bills. I borrowed the money." "Borrowed?" I whispered, tasting ash. "You mean stole?" "No!" Serena's voice shrilled. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. And the lake house. It's not like you were using it. My family needed a place to stay." Something cracked inside my chest. "Not like I was using it. Serena, I've worked double shifts for medication. Eaten 1 meal a day to stretch groceries. Haven't turned my heat above 60 degrees because I can't afford the electric bill." Jonathan stared at her. A stranger in his home. "Serena? My mother could have died. What if she'd had a medical emergency and couldn't afford treatment? But she didn't." Serena sobbed. "She's fine, healthy. My father has diabetes and heart problems. He needed the money more." Her callousness struck me hard. Fine. Healthy. I remembered nights. Chest tight with stress, counting pills. Supermarket trips, calculator in hand, putting back items I couldn't afford. "Where is my house now?" I asked, barely a whisper. Serena wiped her nose, smearing designer makeup. "My parents are living there, and my brother's family. They've been renovating it, making improvements, with my money," Jonathan stated flatly. Serena nodded miserably. I sank into my chair, exhausted. For 2 years, I'd believed Jonathan was busy, proud of his success, even as I struggled alone. All this time, he thought he was providing for me, that I was secure. "Mum?" Jonathan said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I thought you were okay. Everything you needed." I looked at my son, the man who'd built an empire, and saw the boy who promised to care for me. He'd tried, but the woman he trusted had stolen that promise from us both. "How much?" I asked Serena. "How much of my money did you take?" Her quiet confession. "All of it? $36,000, plus a house worth at least $200,000 more. Serena's family, living like kings on money, meant to keep me from poverty." Jonathan stood slowly, movements controlled. "Serena, pack your things. I want you out of my house tonight." "Jonathan, please," she begged, reaching for him. "We can fix this. I'll pay your mother back." He stepped away. "With what money? You haven't worked a day since we married. Everything your family has, was stolen from my mother." I watched my daughter-in-law crumble. No pity, no satisfaction, just a hollow emptiness where trust used to be. She'd looked me in the eye for 2 years, sat at this very table, knowing my struggle while her family lived in luxury. As her sobs echoed, I knew this Thanksgiving was unforgettable. Not for family, but for learning that the brightest smiles can hide the darkest secrets. After Serena left, sobbing, begging for forgiveness neither Jonathan nor I could give, my house felt different, quieter, but not peaceful. The silence was heavy with unanswered questions, betrayal settling into every corner. Jonathan wanted his lawyer immediately. I asked him to wait, not for second thoughts, but because I knew we needed to uncover the full extent of what Serena had done. Thieves rarely steal just once, and that cold certainty was just the beginning of how everything would change. Have you ever felt that unsettling quiet after a storm, when you know the worst is over, but the air still trembles with what happened? The next morning, my worn linoleum floors lay unscrubbed. I called in sick for the first time in 2 years, a family emergency. Jonathan returned, buried under boxes of documents. We spread them across my small dining table, the same place Serena had smiled. The deed to the lake house lay exposed. My signature, clear as day, yet utterly wrong. "This isn't how I sign," I whispered, pointing to the crooked M. A chill, sharp and cutting, crept down my spine. The forged reality was far more sinister. Have you ever felt that cold, unsettling dread when a perfect facade finally cracks? The forged signature on the deed was just the first horrifying clue. Jonathan, his jaw tight, had snapped a picture of my true signature from an old birthday card, comparing it to the clumsy forgery on the deed. The differences were subtle, but undeniable, once you knew what to look for. "She forged your signature," he said, his voice flat with a chilling anger. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was a deliberate act of betrayal, colder and more calculated than I could have imagined. We kept digging. The bank records Ms. Albright had emailed showed the monthly payments going to an account in my name, but at a bank I'd never used. Someone had opened an account using my personal information. "I need to see this account," I declared, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. Jonathan called the bank, but they wouldn't release details to him. So we drove. My hands shook as I walked into the grand marble lobby of First National Bank, clutching my driver's license and social security card like a shield. The bank representative, a kind young woman with a puzzled expression, scrolled through records. The account was opened 2 years and 1 month ago, just weeks before the first payment was scheduled to reach you. My blood ran cold. The address on file is 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B, the same address Ms. Albright had mentioned. "The phone number isn't yours either, ma'am," she added, confused. "You've never been in this branch before, have you?" "Never in my life," I confirmed, my voice steady. She showed us the signature card from the account's opening, the same clumsy, fake version of my name. "This is identity theft," the representative stated, her voice full of concern. "You need to file a police report immediately." But we weren't done. Jonathan had brought every financial record related to his support for me. As we sat in the bank's quiet customer service area, a more complete, horrifying picture emerged. The monthly payments were only the beginning. Jonathan had also sent additional funds for my medical expenses, money I'd never seen. $500 for new glasses, $800 for dental work, $1,000 last Christmas as a bonus. Every single payment, meant to ease my burden, had vanished into that fake account. "How much?" I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. Jonathan's fingers flew across his phone's calculator. his face paling with each entry. $43,000. Over 2 years, she stole $43,000 from you. The number hit me like a physical blow. $43,000. More money than I'd ever had. Enough to have lifted the crushing weight of worry. Enough for security. For peace. Instead, I'd been counting pennies, choosing between medicine and food, while Serena lived a life of luxury built on my deprivation. Next, we drove to 847 Maple Street. It was a rundown apartment complex, flickering neon signs, broken concrete steps. Apartment 2B was empty, a for rent sign in the grimy window. She probably rented it just long enough to establish the fake address, Jonathan said, his jaw tight with anger. But my mind was elsewhere. Jonathan, how did she get my personal information? My social security number, my date of birth, all those details to open the account? He was quiet. From our house, I keep copies of important family documents in my home office. She would have had access to everything. The betrayal cut deeper with each new revelation. Serena hadn't simply seized an opportunity. She had meticulously planned this, systematically stealing my identity and my money while living in my son's home, sharing his bed, pretending love. That evening, back in my living room, surrounded by the mounting evidence, Jonathan looked at me, tears in his eyes. "Mum, I'm so sorry. I trusted her completely. I never thought to verify that you were getting the money because she was the one who suggested I send it in the first place." That detail hit me like another ice-cold wave. She suggested it. Jonathan nodded miserably. About 6 months after Dad died, she mentioned how worried she was about you managing on your own. She said it would be a wonderful gesture if I could help with your expenses. She even offered to coordinate with Ms. Albright. I closed my eyes, reeling from Serena's profound manipulation. She had presented herself as the caring daughter-in-law, feigning concern for her struggling mother-in-law, all while ensuring every dollar meant for me ended up in her family's pockets. "And the lake house?" I asked. "Same thing. She said you'd mentioned wanting to live near water, that it would be good for your health and peace of mind. She helped me find the property, negotiated the price, handled all the paperwork. Serena had played my son like a cruel violin, twisting his love for me against both of us. She'd made him feel generous and caring, while systematically robbing me of everything he'd tried to give. As Jonathan gathered the papers to take to his lawyer, Mr. Davison, I sat alone, staring at the walls of my small, cramped house. This space, with its old furniture and broken air conditioner, wasn't supposed to be my reality. I was meant to be comfortable in a beautiful lake house, free from financial worry. Instead, Serena's parents were likely enjoying my stolen retirement, while I rationed medication. But knowing the shocking truth, as painful as it was, felt like the first step toward reclaiming my life. Serena had stolen more than money. She'd stolen 2 years of security, of dignity, of the peace that comes from knowing your child is looking out for you. Tomorrow, we'd start the process of getting it all back. Tonight, for the first time in 2 years, I went to bed knowing exactly where I stood, and that knowledge, bitter as it was, felt like power. Have you ever faced a revelation so profound it shattered your world, yet simultaneously gave you the strength to fight back? The next morning, while scrubbing floors, Mr. Davison's call came. My knees ached, hands raw from chemicals, but I kept working. I needed every dollar. "Mrs. Vance," Mr. Davison's voice was grim, "we need to meet immediately. What we've uncovered goes far beyond initial suspicions." Jonathan picked me up after my shift. His face was drawn, exhausted. He'd barely slept, plunging into this investigation with the same fierce intensity he brought to his business. But this was personal. It was destroying him. At Mr. Davison's office, a file thick with documents lay on the table. "Serena didn't just steal from you, Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice heavy. "She's been running what amounts to a small-scale fraud operation using your identity." The room seemed to tilt. Serena had opened not one, but 3 separate bank accounts in my name, applied for credit cards, taken out a small loan. She'd even filed false tax returns, claiming me as a dependent while reporting income I'd never earned. The IRS has been trying to contact you about discrepancies, Mr. Davison continued, his gaze steady. They've been sending notices to the fake address. You're currently under investigation for tax evasion. My breath caught. Tax evasion? But I'd always filed honestly. We know that now, but the IRS doesn't, he explained. Serena reported you received the money Jonathan sent. From their perspective, you've hidden income. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. How much did she steal in total? Mr. Davison flipped pages. $43,000 originally, plus credit card spending, loan proceeds, fraudulent tax refunds, approximately $78,000. The number struck me like a physical blow. $78,000. More than 4 years of my janitor's salary. Enough to change everything. And the house? I asked. That's more complicated, Mr. Davison admitted. The property is legally in your name, Mrs. Vance, based on the forged deed. Serena's family has been living there, making improvements with the stolen money. They've actually increased its value significantly. My mind flashed to Serena's parents, whom I'd met twice. Had they known? Can we get it back? Jonathan pressed. Yes, but we'll need law enforcement. This isn't civil, it's criminal fraud, identity theft, tax evasion. Serena could face serious prison time. I was quiet. Serena's tears on Thanksgiving. Were they remorse or panic? What about her family? I asked. Her parents? Her brother with the children? Mr. Davison's expression was sympathetic. They'll have to vacate. If they prove they didn't know the money was stolen, they might avoid criminal charges. But they can't keep what was bought with fraudulent funds. Jonathan stared out the window, jaw tight. Where is Serena now? She's staying with her parents at the lake house, Mr. Davison confirmed. Our investigator confirmed she's been there since she left your house on Thanksgiving. So she ran straight to the people who'd been living off my mother's stolen money, Jonathan said bitterly. Of course she did. That afternoon, we drove to Lake Morrison. I'd never seen the house. My house. As we pulled into the long driveway, I gasped despite myself. It was beautiful. A sprawling ranch-style home, large windows overlooking the water, surrounded by mature trees and manicured gardens. This was what Jonathan had intended for me. This peaceful, comfortable place, where I could have spent my retirement watching sunsets, instead of worrying about my next meal. The truth was out. Ugly and raw. Now, it was time to face the architects of this stolen dream. Have you ever walked into a place that should have been yours, only to find it tainted by someone else's betrayal? Serena's father answered the door, his face falling when he saw Jonathan and me. Oh, he said quietly, a tremor in his voice. We've been expecting you. Serena appeared behind him, looking smaller and younger than I'd ever seen her. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and an old sweater. Her face was puffy from crying. Eleanor, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. I looked at her. This woman who'd smiled at me across countless dinner tables, meticulously destroying my financial security. I felt nothing but cold, quiet anger. Are you? I asked, my voice flat. Are you really sorry, Serena? Or are you just sorry you got caught? She started sobbing again. But I wasn't moved. I'd seen her tears before, believed in them, even felt pity sometimes. I never meant for it to go this far. She choked out. It started with just borrowing the first payment to help my parents with their mortgage. I was going to put it back before anyone noticed. But you didn't, Jonathan said, his voice like ice. You took more and more. You stole my mother's identity, filed false tax returns, opened credit cards in her name. That's not borrowing, Serena. That's fraud. Serena's mother appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. We didn't know, she said desperately, looking at me. We thought Jonathan was just being generous, helping us through a difficult time. Serena told us he'd insisted on buying us the house. I looked at this older woman, probably my age, and saw genuine shock and horror in her eyes. She hadn't known. None of them had, except Serena. The IRS thinks I'm a tax cheat because of what your daughter did, I said quietly, my gaze piercing Serena. I could face charges because Serena filed false returns in my name. Serena's mother gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Oh my God, Serena, what have you done? But Serena just kept crying, offering excuses and apologies that meant nothing now. She'd had 2 years to confess, 2 years to make this right, and she'd chosen to dig deeper instead. Mr. Davison stepped forward, his briefcase full of legal documents. Mrs. Stevens, I'm going to need you and your family to vacate this property within 30 days. Everything purchased with fraudulent funds will need to be returned or compensated. As I watched Serena's family absorb the devastating reality, a strange feeling washed over me. Relief, not satisfaction, not revenge, just a quiet relief that the truth was finally out in the open. The police will be here tomorrow to take Serena into custody, Mr. Davison continued. I'd recommend she surrender voluntarily. Serena looked up at Jonathan with desperate eyes. Please don't let them arrest me. I'll pay everything back. I promise. I'll get a job. I'll work day and night. Jonathan shook his head sadly. With what skills, Serena? You've never worked a day in your life. You don't even know how to work. All you know how to do is take. As we left the lake house, I turned back for one last look at the place that should have been my home for the past 2 years. Soon it would be. But it felt hollow now, tainted by the knowledge of how Serena had stolen it from me. Mum, Jonathan said as we drove away, I'm going to make sure you never want for anything again. I'm going to take care of you the way I should have been doing all along. I patted his hand gently. You were taking care of me, honey. It's not your fault that Serena stole what you gave me. But as we drove back toward my small, cramped house, I knew that everything was about to change. Serena would face the consequences of her crimes, and I would finally get the security and comfort that Jonathan had always intended for me. The confrontation was over. Now came justice. Have you ever seen someone unravel so completely, and in that moment realized the profound hollowness of their deceptions? The divorce papers were finalized on a grey Tuesday in February, 3 months after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner. I sat in the courthouse hallway beside Jonathan as Mr. Davison, his lawyer, emerged from the courtroom. Serena had signed everything without contest, he reported. She'd already been facing an 18-month term for fraud and identity theft, and fighting the divorce would only add legal fees she couldn't afford. It's done, Mr. Davison said, sitting down. The marriage is dissolved. All assets purchased with stolen funds revert to their rightful owners. Mrs. Vance, you now legally own the lake house, and all the money in the fraudulent accounts has been frozen pending full restitution. Jonathan let out a long, ragged breath. What about her family? They vacated the property last week, Mr. Davison confirmed. Her parents moved in with her brother temporarily. They've been surprisingly cooperative. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that this nightmare was finally ending, but sadness for the collateral damage. Serena's parents were innocent in a way too. They'd lost their home and what little savings they had, all because their daughter chose to exploit instead of asking for help. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of paperwork and adjustments. Jonathan threw himself into making things right with the same fierce intensity he brought to building his business empire. He hired a team of forensic accountants to untangle Serena's fabricated tax filings, worked tirelessly with the IRS to clear my name, and personally oversaw every detail of transferring ownership of the lake house back to me. But the most profound change was in Jonathan himself. The successful businessman, once too consumed by his empire for regular calls, became a son who stopped by every few days. He called just to check on me, insisted on taking me to doctor's appointments, and joined me for grocery shopping. You don't have to hover, honey, I told him one afternoon as he helped me pack the few belongings I wanted to keep from my old house. I'm not going anywhere. He paused, folding one of my old quilts. Mum, I missed 2 years of your life because I was foolish enough to trust Serena completely, I'm not missing anymore. I understood his guilt, though I didn't think he deserved it. Serena had been a master manipulator, twisting his love for me to hide her shameful deeds. But I also knew trust, once shattered so completely, takes time to rebuild. Even trust in yourself. Moving into the lake house felt surreal. The place was beautiful, undeniably so. But it carried the heavy weight of everything that had happened. Serena's family had, I had to admit, maintained it well. The gardens were neat, the house clean and updated. They'd even added a screened porch overlooking the water, which I immediately fell in love with. Yet it felt like moving into someone else's life, not reclaiming my own. "We can change anything you want," Jonathan offered as we walked through the sun-drenched rooms. "New furniture, different paint colours, whatever makes it feel like home to you." I appreciated his thoughtfulness, but I wasn't sure new curtains could erase the knowledge that Serena's father had sat in this very living room for 2 years, reading his morning paper, while I rationed medication 50 miles away. The financial restitution process proved more complex than I'd expected. The accounts Serena had opened in my name held not just the money Jonathan sent, but also funds from the credit cards she'd used and the loan she'd taken out. Untangling it all required forensic accounting and months of meticulous documentation. "The good news, Ms. Vance," my new financial advisor explained, "is that when all is said and done, you'll have not just the original money your son sent, but also accumulated interest and some additional compensation for the identity theft. We're looking at approximately $95,000 once everything is recovered." $95,000. I'd never imagined having that kind of money. It was enough to live comfortably for years, to never worry about choosing between groceries and medicine again, to actually enjoy my retirement instead of working until my body gave out. But the money felt strange in my hands, tainted by the knowledge of how it had been stolen and recovered. I found myself almost missing the raw simplicity of my old life, where I knew exactly where I stood, even if that place was barely getting by. The hardest part, perhaps, was dealing with the community's reaction. In a town our size, Serena's arrest and the subsequent court proceedings had been front-page news. Everyone knew what she'd done, and by extension, everyone knew I'd been the victim of an elaborate fraud scheme. Reactions varied wildly. Some were genuinely sympathetic, offering help and expressing outrage on my behalf. Others seemed almost suspicious, as if they couldn't believe I hadn't known what was happening. A few made comments that suggested I should be grateful for the attention, as if being defrauded was somehow better than being ignored. The worst were the people who acted like I'd simply won the lottery instead of having my identity stolen. "Well, at least it all worked out in the end," one neighbour chirped. "Now you're sitting pretty by the lake." I wanted to shake them, to scream that having your daughter-in-law systematically steal your identity and rob you for 2 years isn't something that just works out. That the money and the house came with the searing knowledge that someone you'd trusted had viewed you as nothing more than a source of funds to exploit. But I kept my mouth shut and focused on rebuilding. The first night I spent alone in the lake house, I sat on the screened porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. The view was beautiful, peaceful in a way I'd never experienced before. But I felt oddly detached, like a guest in someone else's dream. My phone buzzed, Jonathan's name on the screen. He'd been calling every night since I'd moved in, checking to make sure I was settling in. "How are you feeling, Mom?" I looked out at the lake, trying to find words for the complicated mix of emotions churning inside me. "Grateful," I said finally, and sad, and angry, and confused, sometimes all at the same time. "That sounds about right," Jonathan said softly. "You know, I've been thinking about what Serena said that last day, about how she never meant for it to go so far." I remembered her tears, her desperate apologies. "What about it?" I asked. "I think she was telling the truth about that part," he mused. "I think she really did start small and then couldn't stop. But that doesn't make it better, does it? If anything, it makes it worse." She had dozens of opportunities to confess, to make it right, and she chose to dig deeper every single time. He was right. Serena's initial crime might have been impulse or desperation, but everything that followed had been calculated deception. She'd looked me in the eye at family dinners, hugged me at holidays, listened to me worry about money, all while knowing she was the reason I was struggling. "I keep thinking about how proud she seemed," I said, when she talked about her family's renovations to the house, the improvements they were making. She was proud of what they'd accomplished with my stolen money. "She wasn't just stealing from you, Mom," Jonathan replied, his voice heavy. "She was stealing from both of us. She stole the relationship we should have had these past 2 years, the peace of mind I thought I was giving you." After I hung up with Jonathan, I walked through the house that was finally, legally, undeniably mine. It was beautiful, comfortable, everything I could have wanted, but it would take time before it felt like home, instead of just the evidence of a crime. I settled into the master bedroom that night, in a bed that was mine, in a house that was mine. With enough money in the bank to last me the rest of my life, I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted. But as I drifted off to sleep, to the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore, I realized that exhaustion wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was the exhaustion that comes after a long, difficult journey is finally over. Tomorrow, I could begin the work of making this stolen dream into something that truly belonged to me. But the journey of healing a shattered trust and finding true peace amidst newfound wealth was only just beginning. Have you ever found that getting what you thought you always wanted sometimes comes with a weight you never expected? A year later, the lake house, once a symbol of theft, became my true sanctuary. The screened porch, where I'd spent that first confused night, now wrapped around me like a comfortable embrace. I'd replaced Serena's family's furniture with pieces that spoke to me, added plants I'd chosen myself, hung photos telling my story. My morning routine was sacred. Coffee on the porch as the sun kissed the lake, watching the water shift colors. This peace was a luxury I'd never imagined. Jonathan's car pulled into the driveway, right on schedule for our weekly breakfast. His initial guilt-driven hovering had settled into something natural, a bond rebuilt on honesty. "Morning, Mom," he called, carrying a bag from the bakery. "Cinnamon rolls." I smiled. "You don't have to bring pastries every week." He grinned. "I know, but I like bringing them. Besides, Mrs. Chen always asks about you. Half the town sees you as their favorite success story." "Any word from the lawyer about Serena's appeal?" I asked. Jonathan shook his head. "Her public defender filed the paperwork, but Mr. Davison says it's just a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. She pled guilty. She'll serve her full sentence. 18 months had seemed short then, but my new life had changed my perspective." "How do you feel?" Jonathan asked, studying my face. "She's where she needs to be," I said. "Not because I want her to suffer, but because she needs to face real consequences. Maybe prison will teach her something our family never could." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the ducks near the shore. "I have something to tell you," Jonathan said, his tone shifting. "I've been seeing someone. Her name is Sarah. She's nothing like Serena." A flutter of anxiety, then a wave of relief. "Tell me about her." "She's a forensic accountant," he said, a faint smile. "Investigates financial irregularities. She knows what Serena did, and she's not interested in my money. She makes her own." "A forensic accountant," I mused. "That seems appropriate. When do I meet her?" "Only if you want to. I'm not rushing this time. Learning to trust my own judgment again." I squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you. But when you're ready, I'd love to meet her." The house was becoming mine in ways beyond legal ownership. It was filled with my choices, my memories, my quiet daily routines that no one could steal, forge, or manipulate. Have you ever realized that true ownership comes not from a deed, but from the quiet peace you find within its walls? 1 year later, I stood on the same screened porch where I'd spent that first confused night, but everything had changed. The space that had once felt foreign now wrapped around me like a comfortable embrace. I'd replaced Serena's family's furniture with pieces that spoke to me, added plants I'd chosen myself, and hung photos that told the story of my real life rather than someone else's stolen dream. The morning routine I'd developed had become sacred. Coffee on the porch as the sun came up over the lake, watching the water change colors with the light. It was a luxury I'd never imagined I'd have. This peace. This time to simply exist without the constant weight of financial worry. Jonathan's car pulled into the driveway right on schedule for our weekly breakfast together. This tradition had started months ago, after his initial guilt-driven hovering had settled into something more natural. We'd both learned to navigate this new relationship, one built on honesty rather than the false foundation Serena had created. "Morning, Mum," he called as he came through the front door, carrying a bag from Mrs. Chen's bakery. "I brought those cinnamon rolls you like," I smiled, setting 2 plates on the kitchen table. "You don't have to bring me pastries every week, honey. I'm perfectly capable of feeding myself now." He grinned. "I know you are, but I like bringing them. Besides, Mrs. Chen always asks about you. Half the town has adopted you as their favorite success story." It was true. The same community that had whispered about my situation during Serena's trial had embraced me once justice was served. People stopped me at the grocery store to ask how I was settling in. Neighbors brought casseroles when I first moved to the lake, and the mailman made sure to mention whenever he had good news to deliver. "Any word from Mr. Davison about Serena's appeal?" I asked as we settled into our usual spots. Jonathan shook his head. "Her public defender filed the paperwork, but he says it's basically a formality. The evidence was overwhelming, and she pled guilty to everything. She'll serve her full sentence." 18 months had seemed like such a short time when the judge announced it. But as the seasons changed and my new life took shape, I'd stopped thinking about Serena's timeline and started focusing on my own. "How do you feel about that?" Jonathan asked, studying my face carefully. I considered the question seriously. A year ago, I might have wanted Serena to suffer more, to face consequences that matched the scale of what she'd stolen from me. But now, sitting in the house that was truly mine, with money in the bank and my son's genuine attention, revenge felt less important than it once had. "I feel like she's where she needs to be," I said finally. "Not because I want her to suffer, but because she needs to face real consequences for what she did. Maybe prison will teach her something that our family never could." Through the legal process, I'd learned more about Serena's psychology than I'd ever wanted to know. She'd grown up in a family that struggled financially, always comparing themselves to others who had more. When she married Jonathan, she'd suddenly had access to wealth she'd never imagined. But apparently it hadn't been enough. Mr. Davison had explained that the therapist her lawyer recommended diagnosed her with something called entitlement syndrome. She genuinely believed she deserved whatever she could take because life had been unfair to her. I'd thought about that explanation for a long time. Life had been unfair to me too when I'd lost my husband and found myself struggling to make ends meet. But I'd never considered that unfairness gave me the right to steal from others. "Have you heard anything about her family?" I asked. Jonathan nodded. "Her parents moved to Arizona to live with her aunt. Her brother found a job in another state. They're starting over, basically." I felt a pang of sympathy for them. Serena's crimes had destroyed more lives than just mine. Her parents had lost their home and their savings. Her brother's children had been uprooted from their schools and friends. All because Serena had chosen theft over honesty. "I've been thinking about writing them a letter," I said. Jonathan's eyebrows rose. "Really? What would you say?" "That I don't blame them. That I hope they're doing okay." I paused, stirring sugar into my coffee. Serena made her choices, but they didn't deserve to pay for them. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the lake. A family of ducks had taken up residence near the shore, and I'd gotten into the habit of tossing them breadcrumbs from my morning toast. Simple pleasures that I'd never had time for when every moment was consumed with survival. "I have something to tell you," Jonathan said eventually, his tone shifting to something more serious. I looked at him expectantly. "I've been seeing someone, a woman I met at a business conference. Her name is Sarah, and she's nothing like Serena." I felt a flutter of anxiety, then forced myself to relax. "Tell me about her." "She's a forensic accountant, actually. She helps companies investigate financial irregularities. She knows what Serena did, knows the whole story, and she's not interested in my money. She makes good money of her own." I smiled. "A forensic accountant. That seems appropriate." Jonathan laughed. "I thought you'd appreciate the irony. She's also incredibly honest, sometimes brutally so. She told me on our third date that she thought I was too trusting and needed to work on my boundaries." "Smart woman," I said. "When do I get to meet her?" "Only if you want to. I'm not rushing anything this time. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again, and part of that means not seeking approval from everyone else before I know how I feel myself." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you for taking your time. But when you're ready, I'd love to meet her." After Jonathan left, I took my usual walk around the property. The gardens that Serena's family had planted were thriving under my care, but I'd added my own touches: a vegetable patch where I grew tomatoes and herbs, a reading nook under the old oak tree, a bird feeder that attracted cardinals and blue jays. The house was becoming mine in ways that had nothing to do with legal ownership. It was filled with my choices, my memories, my quiet daily routines that no one could steal or forge or manipulate. That afternoon, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I called my old supervisor at the cleaning company, Mrs. Henderson. "This is Eleanor Vance. I wanted to let you know that I won't be coming back to work." There was a pause. "Are you feeling all right, Eleanor? You've been out quite a while now." "I'm feeling better than I have in years," I said, smiling at the truth of it. "I'm retiring." It felt strange to say the word. I'd never imagined I'd be able to retire, had assumed I'd work until my body gave out. But the money Serena had stolen, and that had been recovered, combined with the house and Jonathan's ongoing support, meant I could finally stop scrubbing other people's floors and start living for myself. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Sarah wants to know if you like Italian food. She's thinking of cooking for you next weekend." I typed back, "Tell her I love Italian food, but she doesn't need to impress me. I already like anyone who makes my son happy." As darkness settled over the water, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, tired, struggling, proud, but quietly desperate. She would never have believed that this peace was possible, this sense of security and contentment. Serena had stolen 2 years of my life, but in a strange way, her crimes had also given me something I might never have had otherwise. They'd forced Jonathan to truly see me, to understand that I needed more than just financial support. I needed his presence, his attention, his genuine care. They'd also taught me something about my own strength. I'd survived the theft, the investigation, the trial, the complicated process of reclaiming my identity and my life. I'd learned that I was tougher than I'd given myself credit for, more resilient than I'd ever needed to be before. I'd also learned something about forgiveness, not forgiveness for Serena, who would have to earn that through genuine change that I might never witness, but forgiveness for myself, for being trusting enough to believe in her lies, and forgiveness for Jonathan, who'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as I had been. As I locked up the house and headed to bed, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a day well lived in a life reclaimed. Tomorrow would bring new small pleasures, new quiet joys, new moments of peace that no one could steal. The lake house that had started as Serena's crime scene had become my sanctuary. The money that had been stolen and recovered had become my security. The son who had been deceived into neglecting me had become my devoted companion. Serena had tried to steal my future, but in the end, she'd only delayed it. Now it was mine, fully, and completely to live exactly as I chose, and I chose peace. What would you do if you found yourself in Eleanor's place, facing such a profound betrayal and then unexpected reclamation? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your voice truly matters to us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice, resilience, and